So the movie Civil War, directed by Alex Garland, who directed movies such as Ex Machina, Annihilation, and that movie Men, that horror film, which I didn't see, but I heard good things about that
I
too.
didn't see that either. I really liked Ex Machina, though. I actually watched it twice, which I rarely do.
Yeah, he's good. And this movie is called Civil War. So this takes place in a sort of dystopian, not too distant American future where the country has completely factionalized under what appears to be a fascistic president who dismantled the FBI, turned the government against his own people, and basically usurped whatever constitutional restrictions there were against him serving a third term. So it paints a very sort of deliberately vague picture of exactly why and how a civil war broke out. But it tells the story through some war photographers who are on a mission from the loyalist stronghold of New York City to Washington, D.C. But because there's a war, they have to take this roundabout 870 some odd mile route. And it is basically a road movie to get to D.C. where obstacles are thrown in their way relating to this Civil War. So Russell went to see this at the iconic Grums Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles, and he gave us a little tour of this old movie palace. So why don't we play that? Just for posterity's sake, as they say.
All right, so for anyone who's curious what it's like to go see a movie at Grums Chinese, I got my ticket for Civil War for tonight. Here's, of course, all the handprints and footprints and all that. It is pretty cool. Just a tip, if you ever do this, you got to make sure that you book for theater number 7, because they have other theaters that are not like the real one. Oh, Darth Vader. So you can see it is it's a very beautiful old Art Deco theater.
Well, you'll find out in a minute, Pam.
And this is the main auditorium where I will be going to see Civil War. As you can see, it's just really, really a very beautiful venue.
Yeah, so that was you. You were seeing it the first time with me. I had never been there. I made a point of getting into that particular theater. And yeah, it was very cool. All right, so one of the reasons we went to see this was it was clear it was going to be a conversation starter, Civil War. Obviously, it's in the zeitgeist. A lot of people are excited about this movie. Some people were a little disappointed that it was not a polemic in either direction. But let's face it, given who writes most of the film criticism, they were mad that it wasn't a polemic against MAGA people. They wanted a bunch of people with red hats running around with machine guns. So this is one that's pretty representative. Why is Civil War so evasive about the nature of its Civil War? Alex Garland's studious objectivity isn't enough. This is just a sample paragraph. I agree with a little bit of what he says here, though.
Okay, before you start, the protagonists of the film are journalists. They're war photographers whose job it is to objectively document what's going on. And that's a very important choice because that is the lens through which we experience the movie.
Exactly. Right. Part of the overall examination of the movie is the job of a war journalist who's covering horrific events to not get involved in them, to only document them.
And try to survive.
And it explores that somewhat through the older mentor character of Kirsten Dunst and her younger protege, self-appointed, who is learning the ropes from her. And we see her transform. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but we see her completely transform over the course of the movie from being this. And I felt like the casting was very specific because that girl's supposed to be 23, but they got a girl who looks 17 to really emphasize that innocence being completely taken away over the course of the movie. I thought that was their choice. So purposeful though it may be, Garland's squeamishness can read only as a failure of nerve. Yes, not anything else. Only that. A more successfully political movie wouldn't be so wary of aiming at real targets, and a bolder allegory might do away with meaning altogether, suggesting logic itself as a casualty of war. In George Romero's The Crazies, a military pathogen turns small-town citizens into homicidal loons who can't be cured or reasoned with. They are the pure products of America, and they've gone crazy. As an unnamed soldier who holds the journalists at gunpoint, Civil War's Jesse Plemons ventures the closest to that register of impermeable madness. But when he starts quizzing them one by one about what kind of American they are, he's revealed as merely a smaller-than-life bigot. Offerman's president remains a cipher, absent even the stature of his office, which, to be fair, has been awfully tarnished of late. He's just a man in a house. Okay, so a couple of things on this. Now, one, it's interesting that he invoked The Crazies because I thought of that movie when I watched this. He is comparing this movie unfavorably to The Crazies as what it could have been. And I really don't agree with. I liked it. I think he liked it more than I did, but I did like it overall. The audience rating is sitting at 78%. I think that's about right. That's about right, put it. So I definitely liked it. It wasn't like a 95% to me because I thought the characters were a little thin. I think he was so busy creating atmosphere. I get it. It was hard to weave in everything that he might have wanted to. So something had to be sacrificed. He only had so much screen time, and I felt like part of what got sacrificed was a greater depth of characterization. I felt like they were all very broad brushstrokes, not entirely two-dimensional. I would say they were 2.5 dimensional. They weren't quite three-dimensional. They weren't kind of in between. Better than two-dimensional, but not as good as three.
Yeah, I don't think they had to be. I mean, we'll get into this later, but they were observers, just like we were observers. They were like a Nick Carraway. You know what I mean? Like Nick Carraway wasn't fully fleshed out either because he was just the lens through which you observed everything that was going on in the story.
Okay, so that's a variation on an experiment that filmmakers try to do every so often, where you have a kind of remove from the main characters, or the main characters are kind of stand-ins, or even where main characters are a cipher or even unlikable. Frankly, Aristotle got it right. He knew his drama. It never really works. I wish it did, because I'm kind of in sympathy with that view of humanity and the way we experience reality and each other. But I've mentioned this movie before. I think it's called Autofocus, the one about Greg Kinnear played the guy who was the lead in Hogan's Heroes. It's a very good example of a movie that took that approach, where the main characters were unlikable and you kind of watch them from a remove. And I wish I liked that movie more than I do, but it definitely leaves you feel. Look, if you're going to make a movie that's disconnected, the audience is going to feel disconnected, right? So you're not, and that removes a certain emotional investment. It's just the way our brains work. Like, if you're not connected to the people, you're just not going to be as emotionally invested. So you sacrifice something when you make that choice, I think. What he says here about George Romero, though, that was when me and Keaton talked for the first time about the movie after he had seen it. That was exactly the comparison I made. I said this movie shares more DNA with these kind of post-apocalyptic horror sci-fi things like Night of the Living Dead or The Road than it does with a conventional war movie, because of its atmospherics, because it is so much, very much like Romero, where it'll be about these characters working through a nightmare vision of America. In this case, rather than zombies, it's these warring armies all around them. And similar to Romero, through that lens, there's an examination of the cruelty and inhumanity that people are capable of under the right circumstances.
All right.
So Alex Garland himself commented on this just a little bit in GQ. I think people, so this was the interviewer, I think people may have expected Civil War to be this explicitly anti-MAGA screed, though there's some obvious subtext there. And his answer was, rightly, I think, they should just watch the film and think about it. Like I said, I'm interested in conversation. I don't want to shut people down. I want to communicate with people. And I want the communication to be two-way. That's in life and it's in work. And like I said, if what you want is people shouting each other down, no problem. There's plenty of it to access. We do not have a shortage of that. So I thought that was a good answer. Now, people who kind of make their living off, oh, the libs are having a woke meltdown about Civil War, or conversely, oh, the conservatives are going crazy about Civil War. Yeah, it's bullshit. Look, man, it's the internet. You can always find a couple people. You got some conservatives saying it's too nice to journalists, which has to be one of the dumbest takes of all time. And of course, predictably, you got a couple of libs saying, it should have been more about Trump and MAGA and the dangers of that, very much like that Slate article does. But as is often the case, our media elites are far out of touch with where the people are and way behind where the people are. Where I'm seeing those takes, it is mostly professional commentators and editorialists having that take. So just perusing Twitter to try to take the temperature of what people were saying about this, it looks like most people got it. Civil War movie from Real Shift. Not picking sides was truly refreshing. Do more of that, Hollywood. Those expecting all-out action from James Rye. Those expecting all-out action will be disappointed. Those expecting some sort of Democrats versus Republicans face-off will be disappointed. Those expecting a meticulously crafted snapshot of journalists operating in a war zone are in for a captivating experience. And here's one of the dumb takes. The new movie Civil War is conditioning propaganda. The radical leftist paw prints are all over this. Okay, genius. New York Independent. All right, see, we do have some of them here. If this is the radical leftist trying to prepare people for the Civil War that they're going to incite, why was it so neutral? Why
Right.
wasn't it about the good trans people of the earth and their allies fighting against the forces of anti-drag conservatives? Why wasn't it that movie? Riddle me that, Batman. This was the funniest I've seen. This trilogy has zero tonal consistency, treating Ken Burns' Civil War, Marvel Civil War, and this Civil War as a trilogy. So Rotten Tomatoes, it's doing pretty well. And actually, I'm slamming some of the smart takes, but overall the critics liked it, 83%. Audience score 78%. Honestly, I think it's probably getting trolled by the conditioning propaganda people. I think the natural score would probably be a little higher than that. And it's doing great. It looks like it's going to be a big hit for A24, the producing company, which does low budget stuff. Even this was only a $50 million movie. It looks like it's opening to about $25 million. So definitely going to be wildly profitable in their first #1 movie. So good for them.
Yeah, good for them. I loved it. I love this movie. I honestly thought it was fantastic. The political bent to it, to the extent there is one, is like vaguely lib. I mean, you get the sense that the president became a fascist and that the
Right.
people turned on him, but the people factionalized in a way that we don't really understand. And
Right.
perhaps the reason why California and Texas sort of partnered up is because of the dire circumstances that they felt were necessary
and it's
to
indicated.
fight back.
Yeah, just to interject, it is indicated. They are very roundabout in painting a picture for you of what's happening, but they do at one point describe the forces as kind of being separate forces with the same goal, but not really together, which
Right.
makes sense that, yeah, California's trying to take out this president. Texas is trying to take out this president. They're not necessarily California and Texas like this. And then they mention, I would love to see a sequel about this. They mention the Maoists in Portland. And there's supposed to basically be some kind of Marxist thing going on in the Northwest that they never really explain.
They mention the Antifa massacre in dialogue, but they never really are clear whether Antifa massacred people or whether the Antifa people were massacred.
Right.
They leave that exceptionally vague. So, like, the politics were very vague, but more than anything, it just painted a very grim picture of the not too distant future and what a total breakdown of society would look like through the eyes of ordinary people who are just trying to document it. These characters on their journey to DC find themselves in dangerous situations with very dangerous people who they know nothing about. They know nothing about what side they're on. They don't even know if they're on a side. Maybe they are just people who are homesteading and protecting their property. There's a very intense scene at a gas station where these armed guys are torturing these guys who they call them looters. We don't know. Maybe they were looters. Maybe these guys are just interested in defending their little gas station because it's all they have left. Or maybe those were enemy combatants and they were not being forthcoming. Like, you know very little except danger. You know when you're in danger and you know when you're safe. And that's all these main characters have to know about on this journey to DC to try and get an interview with this embattled commander-in-chief before he loses the entire nation. And he is losing and projecting all the time that he's winning. And so it really just plays on these very sort of like primal instincts of when you're in danger and when you are safe, and who these people are, who these antagonists are who come in their way is almost not important. Right? You don't know much about it. There are little hints that you can figure out, but you don't know much, and that makes it scarier. It gives it this very kind of eerie, almost nightmarish quality. It's very effective. It's very tense. And just as a piece of artistry, it is flawlessly made. The cinematography is beautiful. The editing is genius because they are documenting these action scenes with their photographs. And so the way they cut back and forth from this very kinetic, fast-paced action scene, they will cut in still photos of what's going on, where the sound cuts out and then it jolts back in. The way they edit that together is amazing. And the two big main events of the movie, which take place very close to the end, I won't spoil it, are both captured in that hybrid still photo, action, cinema mode. Really amazingly executed. I have a little bit more, but go on.
Well, I think part of why that was so effective, and this is part of what the movie tries to communicate, I think, pretty clearly, because Kirsten Dunst, who is this seasoned photojournalist who's covered civil wars around the world, has nightmares and flashbacks to horrible things that she's seen in these civil wars. And by having these still black and white photos, the intention is for you to make that connection because you've seen those photos. But these photos are in America.
Indeed.
And I thought one of the most arresting scenes illustrating the moral ambiguity of being in their position was a scene where they kind of spontaneously embed with a group of soldiers that are clearing a building. And afterwards, you see one of them, the Latino one, laughing with them while the other ones are executing the people that they just captured.
The music in that scene is great. The way it is very like joyful, kind of like R&B track.
And they're just hanging out, laughing, sharing a cigarette, but off here. And hey, what? You think that doesn't happen when journalists go to cover these civil wars? They're
a little smoke break after a firefight.
They can't do anything to intervene, right? That's not their job. They're there to document. I thought it got across how morally fraught that can be very well. But what you're saying, the eeriness, that's why I say this reminded me more of George Romero than Oliver Stone. It felt like those very creepy 70s movies. And it's funny, this guy calls out the Crazies because it reminded me of the Crazies. He's saying it's not like the Crazies. It kind of is like the Crazies, where everyone around you is insane. And they're using that as a way of exploring a total collapse in society.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, everything from the music, the editing, the art direction, the color, the light, the way the dialogue was very minimal. It really tells the story through images. There's this great, very tense set piece where they're driving through this Christmas carnival, like a winter wonderland carnival. Yeah. And there is a sniper in the house back there in the background, and here's the Santa Claus and the Christmas tree. The eeriness of this scene, first of all, this goes to painting a picture of how far the country has fallen. You get the sense from this scene, even though it's never spoken, that the Civil War broke out over the holiday season at a time when you would think we're least likely to turn on each other, in the time of love and unity and family. That's obviously when this happened, because the Christmas decorations were set up and they never got taken down. Yeah. Right? So it's a way of saying...
That hadn't occurred to me. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a way of saying something very profound without using any dialogue or anything at all. So there's a sniper in this house who's firing on them, and we don't know who that sniper is or why. We don't know if he's fighting for a side. We don't know if he's just protecting his home and doesn't want people passing through. But look at that shot. I mean, that's just a beautifully composed shot with the blurred house in the background with the sniper, and then this semi out of focus Christmas tree in the midground, and then the rival sniper in the foreground. Just like every shot was perfect. And then a shot hits Santa Claus right in the face and blows Santa's head off. This is Jesse Plemons. Now, this was the most on the nose sort of symbolism of the movie. He definitely is like a MAGA guy. That's what the red sunglasses. He sees red. He literally sees red. Right.
Yes, what the journalist said about, it's clearly about race. No, that's not so clear, because he starts asking them, what kind of American are you? Where are you from? And the clearly Latin guy says Florida, and he doesn't shoot him. And I don't want to give things away, but somebody says they're not from America, and that's who he shoots. So is it race or is it xenophobia?
It's pretty, I mean, I think it's xenophobia and also just sadism. It was pretty clear he was going to kill everybody in that scene. And then on the liberal side,
I'm just going to say, Jesse Plemons steals every scene and everything I have ever seen him in. Breaking Bad, Black Mirror episode that he was in. He is Fargo. Anything you stick this guy in, he steals it.
Yeah, he was great in that scene. And then this is sort of like this posh sort of blue state enclave where there's peace and there's this open boutique independent store where the girl's reading her little book behind the counter, and she says, yeah, we know there's a civil war. We just don't like to pay much attention to it. And life goes on. There's a woman walking her dog outside. And then there's this amazing shot, which I couldn't find on the internet. But when they go outside the store, you see out of focus on a rooftop these two good old boys with their guns who are clearly keeping the peace in the neighborhood.
Right.
And you don't know who they are. Is this town under hostile occupation? Are they friendly? Are they guarding the neighborhood from hostile invaders? You don't know that. What you know is that even this place of relative calm and peace is being policed from the sky in the way that, say, the FBI and the CIA police us from the sky in ways that we don't know. Do we need those structures in place to prevent us from descending into civil war? Or are they hostile agitators? It's very thought-provoking. It is extremely artistically done. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
That's 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up. 2 thums up. I thought it was fantastic. I recommend it.
See Civil War. It's definitely, it's going to inspire a lot of conversation, and it's
the first thing in the history of this show that I have unironically liked.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. He's had Amanda on a couple times. He's not too crazy about her either.
Has she been on? Well, in that case, it's the second thing that I've unironically liked. Yeah.
So it's a big insult to your wife.
That's right.
No, it was really good. It was very thought provoking, and not picking a side was definitely the right choice, as everybody but people who get paid to bitch seem to agree.
Oh yeah, like if you're like one of these like I mean, these exist on the left too, but they're mostly like a right-wing sort of culture war thing. Meltdown. The libs are melting down. Everybody has to melt down. If no one's melting down, they're not making any money. So they have to tell you somebody's melting down. Right.
That's it. They do. Yeah. And sometimes it's true. But very often, they find 2 people who haven't left their house in 8 years who who tweeted some shit.
Exactly.
Please clap.